The Apache maid whispered, "I'll do anything except cleaning." I was stunned. He had chosen this motel because it was cheap, close to the highway and familiar enough not to surprise him. He was not looking for comfort, only rest. The Apache motel stood quietly beside the road, its sign slightly faded, its paint worn by years of sun and dust. It was not a bad place, just old. The kind of place that had seen many people pass through, travelers, workers, families on tight budgets, each leaving behind a small piece of their story. He parked his car, stepped out, and stretched his back. The air smelled of asphalt and dry wind. Inside the office, the front desk clerk handed him a key card with practice speed. No long talk, no warm welcome, just efficiency. He appreciated that. After signing the register, he took his bag and walked toward his room. The hallway was quiet, broken only by the soft hum of an old vending machine and the distant sound of traffic. His room was exactly what he expected, clean but simple. A bed with a patterned blanket, a small table, a chair, a television that looked older than his phone, and a bathroom with white tiles. He dropped his bag on the chair and sat on the bed, letting out a slow breath. For a few minutes he did nothing, just sat there, listening to the silence. He was about to turn on the television when there was a knock at the door. At first he ignored it, thinking he might have imagined the sound. Then the knock came again, clearer this time. He stood up, walked to the door, and opened it halfway. A maid stood outside, holding a cart with fresh towels and cleaning supplies. She looked to be in her late 20s or early 30s. Her uniform was neat but clearly worn from daily use. Her dark hair was pulled back simply, and her face showed signs of a long shift, tired eyes but alert and sharp. "Housekeeping," she said calmly. He checked his watch. It was later than usual for cleaning. "I'm already checked in," he replied politely. "I didn't ask for service." He stepped aside slightly, allowing her to look into the room. "It's fine," he said. "Everything's okay." She glanced at him, her eyes meeting his for just a second. There was no flirtation, no joke on her face, only a strange mix of tired humor and honesty. She gave a small shrug as if the words had slipped out on their own. "Just kidding," she added quickly, pushing her cart forward. "Have a good evening." He stood there for a moment, the door still half open, the quiet hallway empty again. Slowly he closed the door and leaned against it. The sentence replayed in his mind, louder now than when she first said it. "I'll do anything except cleaning." He sat back down on the bed, frowning slightly, trying to understand why such a simple sentence had unsettled him. At first he laughed to himself. People say strange things all the time. Maybe she was tired. Maybe it was sarcasm. Maybe it was just her way of getting through a long shift. Still, the words refused to leave his thoughts. He turned on the television, but the noise didn't help. His attention drifted back to the hallway, to her face, to the way she spoke. There was no complaint in her voice, yet the sentence felt like one. After a while, he turned the TV off and reached for his phone. No new messages. No urgent calls. For the first time all day, he had nothing demanding his attention, and that silence made room for thought. He wondered how many rooms she had cleaned that day, how many beds she had made, how many bathrooms she had scrubbed, how many guests had ignored her, talked over her, or treated her like part of the furniture. He realized he had never really thought about motel staff before, not in any meaningful way. They were always just there, doing their jobs quietly. Later, he stepped outside to get some fresh air. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in soft orange and purple shades. A few other guests were walking around, carrying bags or talking on their phones. Somewhere down the corridor, he saw the same maid pushing her cart again, moving from room to room. This time, he watched from a distance. She knocked, waited, spoke briefly, then moved on. Her movements were efficient, almost automatic. It was clear she had done this countless times before. As she passed by, she noticed him standing near his door. She gave a short nod, polite but distant. He nodded back, unsure whether to say anything. The moment passed quickly, and she continued down the hallway. He went back into his room, but his restlessness followed him inside. The motel suddenly felt less quiet, as if the walls held stories he had never bothered to hear. He sat by the window, looking out at the parking lot, thinking about how easily people crossed paths without truly seeing each other. That single sentence had opened something in his mind. It made him realize how rarely he listened beyond the surface of words. How often he took simple interactions for granted. He imagined what her day might look like from morning to evening, waking up early, putting on the same uniform, walking into the same building, repeating the same tasks. He wondered if she had once dreamed of doing something else. Most people did. Life, however, had a way of redirecting dreams into routines. As night settled in, the motel lights flickered on. He lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling. He wasn't disturbed or upset, just thoughtful, the kind of thoughtfulness that stays quiet but deep. He realized that what stunned him wasn't the words themselves, but the feeling behind them, a feeling of being tired, unseen, and yet still standing, still showing up, still doing the job. Eventually, sleep began to pull him in. His eyes closed, but the image of the maid pushing her cart down the hallway remained in his mind. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. But somehow, he felt that this brief moment was not meaningless. It was the beginning of something he didn't yet understand. The next morning began quietly. He woke up before his alarm, the soft light slipping through the thin curtains of the motel room. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then the patterned blanket, the faint sound of traffic, and the unfamiliar smell of detergent reminded him. The Apache motel. And with that reminder came the memory of the maid and her strange sentence. He sat up on the bed and rubbed his face. The words were still clear in his mind, as if she had said them only minutes ago. He didn't know why they stayed with him. He had heard hundreds of random comments from strangers in his life, yet this one felt different. Maybe it was the way she said it, or maybe it was the tired honesty behind it. After a quick shower, he got dressed and stepped outside. The morning air was cooler, calmer. A few guests were already loading their cars. Somewhere near the office, he could hear a radio playing softly. He decided to walk toward the small breakfast area the motel offered. It wasn't much, just coffee, packaged snacks, and a couple of small tables, but it was enough. As he poured himself a cup of coffee, he noticed her again. She was standing near a storage room, speaking with another staff member. Her posture was straight, her voice low but firm. When the other person walked away, she turned and almost bumped into him. "Oh, sorry," she said quickly. "No, it's my fault," he replied. "Good morning." "You settling in okay?" she asked, not looking at him. "Yes," he said. "Everything's fine, thanks." "It was nothing," she said. "Just a bad joke." Long days. As he sat down with his coffee, he found himself watching the routine of the motel more closely than before. The staff moved constantly, cleaning, carrying supplies, answering questions, always busy, rarely noticed. Guests came and went, focused on their own schedules. Later that day, he returned to his room to work. His laptop was open, documents spread across the screen, but his concentration was weak. Every now and then, he heard the sound of a cart rolling down the hallway, followed by soft knocks on doors. Each time, his attention drifted. In the afternoon, he stepped out to get ice from the machine at the end of the corridor. As he filled the bucket, he heard footsteps behind him. "You're the one from room 214, right?" a voice asked. He turned. It was her again, holding a clipboard this time. "Yes," he said, "that's me." "If you don't mind me asking," he said gently, "do you like working here?" "People think cleaning is simple," she continued. "They think it's easy or that anyone can do it, but it's tiring, not just the work, the way people look at you, or don't look at you." "I never thought about it that way," he admitted. "Most people don't," she said. "And that's okay. I didn't think about it either before I started." She smiled faintly. "A lot of things," she said, "still do." The motel was quieter now, the hallway lights dimmer. As he passed the front desk, he noticed a small argument between a guest and the clerk. The guest's voice was raised, sharp with impatience. The clerk remained calm, apologizing again and again. The maid stood nearby, waiting. When the guest finally walked away, clearly unsatisfied, she helped the clerk organize some papers without being asked. There was no praise, no thanks, just silent teamwork. He realized then that her whispered sentence from the day before was not about avoiding work. It was about wanting to be seen as more than the work. Back in his room, he sat at the small table instead of the bed. He thought about his own job, how often he felt tired, frustrated, or unappreciated. The difference was that people usually listened to him. They respected his position. They didn't talk over him or ignore him. That realization made him uncomfortable. The next day, as he packed his bag, he noticed a note slipped under his door. It was a simple message from housekeeping reminding guests of checkout time and wishing them safe travels. At the bottom, written in neat handwriting, was a small smiley face. It wasn't much, but it felt personal. When he checked out, he saw her one last time near the office. Their eyes met. She gave a small nod. "Take care," she said. "You too," he replied. As he walked to his car, he understood something important. Her words had never been meant to shock. They were a quiet truth spoken by someone who rarely felt heard. And somehow, by listening, he had started to see a world he had ignored for too long. That understanding stayed with him as he drove away, heavier than his luggage but far more meaningful. The following day felt different to him, even before it fully began. He woke up with a strange awareness, as if his mind had already stepped outside the usual routine. The motel room was the same, the sounds were the same, yet something inside him had shifted. He no longer felt like just a passing guest. He felt like a quiet observer. He noticed small details now. The way the curtains didn't fully block the sunlight, the faint marks on the wall that told stories of past travelers, the hum of cleaning carts starting early in the morning. These sounds had always been there, but now they meant something. He stepped outside his room and walked slowly down the hallway. A maid was already working, knocking gently, waiting patiently. Another staff member was refilling supplies near the storage area. Everything moved with a rhythm that guests rarely noticed. As he reached the lobby, he saw her again. She was talking to the manager, standing straight, listening carefully. The manager spoke quickly, pointing at a paper, clearly explaining something. She nodded, her face calm, even though her shoulders looked tense. When the manager walked away, she stayed still for a moment, staring at the paper. Then she folded it neatly and slipped it into her pocket. "Busy morning?" he asked softly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up and gave a tired smile. "Aren't they all?" The silence felt natural, not uncomfortable. "Do you ever get used to it?" he asked. "Used to what?" she replied. "Being rushed all the time," he said. "Always expected to move faster." Later that afternoon, he decided to sit outside near the parking area working on his laptop. The weather was warm and a light breeze moved through the trees. From where he sat, he could see the motel entrance clearly. Guests came and went. Some smiled. Some complained. Some didn't say anything at all. The staff responded the same way each time, with patience. Then something happened that caught his attention. A middle-aged guest walked into the lobby, clearly upset. His voice was loud, filled with frustration. Even from a distance, it was easy to sense the tension. The guest complained about his room, his tone sharp and accusing. The front desk clerk tried to explain calmly, but the guest kept interrupting. Soon, the manager appeared. He listened briefly, then turned toward the maid toward her. "You cleaned that room, right?" the manager asked, his voice firm. She nodded. "Yes, this morning." She didn't argue, she didn't raise her voice. She simply stood there, quiet and composed, even though the blame had landed on her without proof. The guest eventually left the lobby, still unhappy but quieter. The manager turned back to her. "Just be more careful next time," he said, already walking away. She nodded again. "Okay." No acknowledgement of her effort. Something tightened in his chest. Later, when the hallway was empty again, he saw her pushing her cart, her movements slower now. He walked beside her for a moment. "That wasn't fair," he said gently. She stopped the cart and looked at him. For a second, her calm expression cracked just a little. "It happens," she said. "It's easier for them to blame us than to listen. But leaving isn't always an option." He thought about her sentence again. "I'll do anything except cleaning." He stepped into the hallway one last time. She was there wiping down a handrail. "Checking out?" she asked. "Yes," he replied. "I just wanted to say thank you." At the front desk, as he handed over his key card, he felt different from the person who had checked in days earlier. He had come looking for rest, but he was leaving with awareness. As he walked to his car, he glanced back at the motel one last time. It looked the same as before, but he knew better now. Inside those walls were people carrying invisible weight, moving through their days unseen. He started the engine and pulled onto the road. He didn't know where life would take her. He didn't know if things would ever change for her or for others like her. But he knew one thing for sure. He would never hear such words the same way again. The road stretched out in front of him as he drove away from the motel. At first, his mind was quiet. The engine sound, the passing trees, and the open sky created a calm space. But slowly, thoughts began to return, not about work or deadlines, but about the days he had just lived. He realized that the Apache motel had changed him in a way he had not expected. It wasn't a dramatic change, nothing loud or sudden. It was gentle, like a small shift in direction that only becomes clear after some distance has been covered. He stopped at a small cafe a few miles down the road. As he waited for his order, he noticed how the staff moved quickly behind the counter. One person took orders, another prepared drinks, another cleaned tables. It looked normal, ordinary. But now he watched more closely. He noticed tired smiles, quick apologies, and the effort to stay polite no matter what. When his coffee was ready, he said thank you and meant it. The person behind the counter looked slightly surprised, then smiled genuinely. That small reaction stayed with him as he returned to his car. As he continued driving, memories from the motel replayed in his mind. The quiet hallway, the rolling cart. The way she stood calmly while being blamed. The strength it took to stay composed day after day. He wondered how many people lived like that, doing their best, being careful, yet rarely being believed. He thought about how easily people judged others based on their jobs, how quickly respect disappeared when someone wore a uniform instead of a suit. He had never considered himself rude or unkind, but now he saw that silence could also be a kind of neglect. By the time he reached his destination later that evening, he felt tired in a different way. Not the tiredness of travel, but the weight of new understanding. He checked into another hotel, one that was newer and brighter. The lobby was polished, the staff well-dressed. At the front desk, the receptionist welcomed him warmly. He smiled back and responded kindly. He noticed how easy it was to treat people well when they were already treated well by the system around them. In his room that night, he unpacked slowly. He placed his belongings neatly, then sat by the window. The city lights outside looked distant and cold. He thought about how many stories were hidden behind those lights, how many people were living lives others never stopped to notice. The next day, back in his regular routine, he found himself behaving differently. In meetings, he listened more carefully. When someone spoke quietly, he paid attention. When a colleague looked tired, he asked if they were okay. These were small actions, but they felt important. One afternoon, he stopped by a grocery store after work. The cashier scanned his items quickly, clearly near the end of a long shift. When the transaction was done, he looked her in the eye and said, "Thank you for your help today." He walked out of the store thinking about how little it took to acknowledge someone and how much it could mean. Days turned into weeks. The memory of the motel didn't fade. Instead, it settled into him like a quiet guide. He began to notice how often service workers were spoken to without patience, how often they were blamed for things beyond their control. Once at a restaurant, he saw a server being spoken to harshly over a small mistake. He felt that familiar tightness in his chest. Calmly, he spoke up, not angrily but clearly. The situation eased. The server later thanked him quietly, almost in disbelief. That moment reminded him of the hallway at the motel, of how no one had spoken for her. He realized that sometimes change didn't come from big actions, but from choosing not to stay silent. One evening, while cleaning out his email, he found a reminder from the days he stayed at the Apache motel. It was a simple receipt. He stared at the name for a moment, feeling an unexpected wave of emotion. He wondered how she was doing, if she was still working there. If she had found a chance to move closer to her dreams, whatever they were. He knew he might never see her again, but that didn't make the connection any less real. He thought about writing a message to the motel, not a complaint, but a note of appreciation. After some thought, he did. He kept it short and respectful, praising the staff for their hard work and professionalism. He didn't mention names, he didn't need to. When he sent it, he felt a quiet sense of completion. Life continued as it always did. There were busy days and slow ones, good moments and frustrating ones, but something had changed in how he moved through the world. He no longer rushed past people without seeing them. He noticed hands working, faces concentrating, bodies tired from effort. He understood that behind every simple service was a human being carrying their own struggles. Sometimes he caught himself repeating that sentence in his mind. "I'll do anything except cleaning." It no longer sounded strange. It sounded honest. It sounded like someone asking to be valued for more than just their task. Months later, while traveling again for work, he stayed at another modest motel. As he walked down the hallway, he passed a maid pushing a cart. Their eyes met briefly. He smiled and nodded. She nodded back. Before entering his room, he paused and said, "Thank you for your work." He knew the world hadn't changed overnight. Systems were still unfair. Many voices were still ignored. But he also knew that awareness had power. Respect had power. Listening had power. The Apache motel was now far behind him, just a place on a map. But the lesson he learned there stayed close, guiding his words, his actions, and his choices. Sometimes all it takes is one moment, one sentence, whispered in a quiet hallway to wake someone up. And once awake, it becomes impossible not to see.